Shockwaves are spreading across the Middle East tonight. In a move that few saw coming and even fewer were prepared for, Donald Trump has reportedly ordered the sudden abandonment of key U.S. war bases in an active conflict region. No phased withdrawal, no gradual transition, no strategic briefing made public in advance. Just a rapid exit, and the consequences are already beginning to unfold. According to early reports, U.S. forces stationed at multiple high-value military installations have either pulled out or significantly reduced their presence within a matter of hours. These are not minor outposts. These are bases that have served as critical hubs for surveillance, rapid response, and regional control. And now they are being left behind. The immediate reaction has been intense. Inside Washington, officials are scrambling to understand the operational impact. Allies across the region are demanding urgent clarification. And global analysts are warning that this move could trigger a dangerous chain reaction. Because when a superpower suddenly steps back from a war zone, it doesn't just create space. It creates uncertainty, and uncertainty in geopolitics is where escalation begins. The timing of this decision is what makes it even more alarming. The region was already under pressure, ongoing tensions, fragile ceasefires, competing interests from multiple Al-Qaeda, and the constant risk of miscalculation. U.S. presence, while controversial, has long acted as a stabilizing factor, deterring aggressive moves and maintaining a delicate balance. Now that balance is shifting. Fast. And in the absence of a clear controlling force, multiple actors may begin moving to fill the gap. Regional militias, state-backed forces, rival powers watching closely for opportunity. Because power vacuums do not remain empty. They get filled, often quickly, and not always peacefully. Markets are already reacting. Early signals suggest rising volatility in oil prices. Intelligence agencies are increasing alert levels. Diplomatic channels are being flooded with urgent communication. This is no longer just a regional development. It's becoming a global concern. But perhaps the most critical question remains unanswered. Why now? What triggered such a sudden and high-risk decision? Was this a calculated strategic move or a response to an immediate threat behind the scenes? Because depending on that answer, the outcome could be very different. Controlled repositioning, or the early stages of a much larger crisis. If you want to understand what's really happening beyond the headlines and how this could reshape global stability, make sure you subscribe now. Because this story is moving fast. And what happens next could change everything. To understand how a decision of this magnitude could unfold so suddenly, it is necessary to step back beyond the breaking headlines and examine the long chain of events that led to this moment. Because the abandonment of U.S. war bases in an active conflict zone is not an isolated decision. It is the result of years of pressure building beneath the surface. The story begins decades ago when the United States established a deep military footprint across the Middle East. What started as strategic positioning during the late 20th century evolved into full-scale military operations after the attacks of September 11, 2001. From Afghanistan to Iraq, U.S. forces expanded their presence, building bases, securing supply routes, and creating a network of operational hubs designed to project power and maintain regional stability. Over time, these bases became more than just military installations. They became control points, centers for intelligence gathering, launch platforms for air operations, coordination hubs for allied forces. But as the years passed, the nature of the conflict began to change. Large-scale wars gave way to fragmented, decentralized threats. Extremist groups adapted, shifting from territorial control to insurgency tactics. Meanwhile, regional powers, particularly Iran, expanded their influence through proxy networks operating across multiple countries. This created a new kind of battlefield, one without clear front lines, one where influence mattered more than territory. And within that environment, U.S. bases played a crucial role in maintaining balance. But that balance was never stable. It was constantly tested. 2019 marked a turning point with rising attacks on strategic assets in the Gulf region. 2020 escalated further, with the killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, followed by retaliatory missile strikes on U.S. bases in Iraq. These events pushed the region closer to direct confrontation. And although full-scale war was avoided, the tension never truly subsided. Instead, it settled into a constant state of low-level escalation. Then came another shift. Inside the United States, political and public pressure began to grow. Questions emerged about the long-term cost of maintaining overseas military operations. Calls for troop reductions became louder, with leaders across different administrations signaling a desire to reduce direct involvement. Gradually, discussions of withdrawal moved from possibility to policy. But even then, the expectation was clear. Any withdrawal would be structured, phased, coordinated with allies. What we are seeing now does not fit that pattern, because historically, even partial drawdowns required months of planning, careful logistics, diplomatic coordination, and gradual transitions to avoid destabilizing the region. This time, the timeline appears compressed, dramatically. Recent weeks may hold the key. Intelligence signals suggested increasing activity among armed groups in Maddow surrounding U.S. positions. Surveillance reports indicated movement, both physical and digital, hinting at possible escalation scenarios. Day by day, pressure began to build. Then suddenly, action. The speed suggests that something may have changed rapidly behind the scenes. Either a new threat emerged or an existing threat reached a critical threshold. And that is what makes this timeline so important, because it shows that this decision did not come out of nowhere. It came from a system under strain, a system balancing military presence, political pressure, and evolving threats, until that balance finally broke. Now, with bases being abandoned and positions being vacated, the region is entering a new phase, one where the rules may no longer be the same, and one where the consequences of past decisions are about to collide with present realities. The first indications did not come from official channels. They came from movement, unusual, accelerated, and highly coordinated movement across multiple U.S. military positions in the region. Local observers began reporting convoys departing at speed, armored vehicles, transport units, and logistical carriers leaving bases that had remained operational for years. At the same time, air traffic surged. Military cargo planes were tracked, taking off within tight time windows, suggesting a synchronized extraction rather than routine rotation. Within hours, a pattern emerged. This was not repositioning. This was withdrawal. According to early field reports, several key installations were either partially evacuated or fully abandoned. In some cases, essential equipment was removed. In others, infrastructure was left behind, indicating that speed may have taken priority over complete extraction. That detail matters, because in standard military protocol, base closures follow a sequence: secure, transfer, dismantle, exit. What appears to have happened here bypasses parts of that sequence, which raises immediate questions. Was there not enough time? Or was the risk of staying greater than the cost of leaving equipment behind? From the U.S. perspective, initial explanations have been cautious and limited. Some officials have framed the move as a strategic redeployment, emphasizing flexibility and force protection. The suggestion is that troops are not leaving the region entirely, but shifting to positions that reduce exposure. However, that explanation does not fully account for the speed. And in geopolitics, speed often signals urgency. On the ground, reactions have been mixed, and in some cases tense. Local allied forces, who have long relied on U.S. coordination and support, were reportedly given minimal notice. This has created immediate operational gaps, areas where intelligence sharing, surveillance coverage, and rapid response capabilities have suddenly weakened. In a conflict environment, even small gaps can become vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, rival actors are watching closely. Militia groups operating in proximity to these bases have begun increasing movement, testing the newly opened space. There are also early indications of repositioning by regional forces seeking to take advantage of the shifting landscape. Because when control is removed, opportunity appears. Then there is the information battle. Conflicting narratives are already forming. One narrative frames the withdrawal as a defensive necessity, triggered by credible threats to U.S. personnel. Intelligence warnings, possibly indicating imminent attacks, may have forced a rapid decision to avoid casualties. Another narrative presents a different interpretation, that the withdrawal is a strategic retreat, evidence of declining U.S. influence, driven not by choice, but by sustained pressure from regional actors. Both narratives carry weight, and both are being amplified, but the truth may lie somewhere in between. There are signs of increased threat levels in recent weeks. There are also signs of long-term strategic recalibration. And when those two forces collide, immediate risk and long-term planning decisions can accelerate quickly. Still, critical uncertainties remain. What specific threat triggered this timeline? Was there a single event or a buildup of multiple risks? And perhaps most importantly, what happens next? Because the event itself is only the beginning. The real impact lies in the aftermath. With bases now vacated, surveillance reduced, and coordination disrupted, the environment on the ground is changing rapidly and unpredictably. And in regions where multiple armed actors operate in close proximity, unpredictability is not just a challenge. It is a danger, because once the structure of control begins to shift, events rarely unfold in a straight line. They escalate, they overlap, and sometimes they spiral. Now the world is reacting. And the reaction is not calm, because when U.S. bases are suddenly abandoned in an active conflict zone, the impact is not contained. It spreads outward across alliances, rivalries, and global markets. The first layer of consequences is immediate and tactical. With key positions vacated, surveillance coverage in certain monodic has dropped. Intelligence flow becomes slower. Response times increase, and in high-risk zones, even a short delay can shift the balance on the ground. For Allied forces operating nearby, this creates uncertainty. Operations that once relied on U.S. coordination now face disruption. Khutut communication may remain open, but the physical presence that backed those communications has changed. And in geopolitics, presence is power. Without it, influence begins to fluctuate. Then comes the second layer, the regional reaction. Across the Middle East, this move is being closely watched by multiple actors, each interpreting it through their own strategic lens. For some, this is seen as an opening, a chance to expand influence into areas that were previously under U.S. observation. Early indicators suggest increased movement by militia groups and regional proxies, testing how far they can push without triggering a response. For others, it is a warning sign, a signal that the security architecture they depended on may no longer be as stable as before. Governments that relied on U.S. backing are now reassessing their positions, quietly evaluating new alliances, new strategies, and new contingencies, because uncertainty forces adaptation. And adaptation can reshape entire regions. Then there is the global dimension. Markets respond to instability. Almost immediately, energy analysts began flagging potential disruptions. The Middle East remains central to global oil supply routes, and any sign of instability raises concerns about flow, pricing, and long-term availability. Even the perception of risk can trigger movement in global oil prices. And when energy markets shift, the ripple effects are worldwide. Transportation costs rise. Supply chains tighten. Economic pressure builds. At the same time, diplomatic channels are heating up. Behind closed doors, emergency discussions are likely underway. Allies are seeking clarity. Partners are asking questions. And rival powers are calculating their next move. Because in moments like this, silence is strategic. Public statements may remain measured, but private conversations are anything but. Now, focus turns to Washington. The political reaction inside the United States is intensifying. Critics are questioning the decision, asking whether abandoning bases sends the wrong signal at a critical moment. They argue that sudden withdrawals can create power vacuums, encouraging escalation rather than preventing it. Supporters, however, present a different view. They frame the move as a necessary step to protect U.S. personnel, prioritizing safety over static positioning in a rapidly changing threat environment. Two interpretations, both with consequences. And at the center of it all, Donald Trump, facing mounting pressure, heightened scrutiny, and a rapidly evolving situation that demands answers. Because leadership decisions in moments like this are never judged in isolation. They are judged by what follows. And that brings us to the most critical question of all. What happens next? Because the current situation is not stable. It is dynamic, fluid, and potentially volatile. The withdrawal of bases does not end a conflict. It changes its shape. And when the shape of conflict changes, so do the risks. The possibility of miscalculation increases. The margin for error shrinks, and the path forward becomes harder to predict. Some analysts are already warning of broader escalation scenarios, where localized tensions expand into wider confrontation. Others believe this could lead to a strategic reset, forcing all sides to reconsider their positions before moving further. Both outcomes are possible, and both depend on what happens in the coming hours and days. Because right now, the situation is still unfolding. This is the moment where everything converges. The withdrawal, the reactions, the uncertainty, all pointing toward a single reality. The situation has changed. Not gradually, not predictably, but suddenly and with consequences that are still unfolding. Because when a major power like the United States shifts its military posture this quickly, it sends a signal far beyond the battlefield. A signal to allies, a signal to adversaries, and a signal to the global system itself. That signal is now being interpreted in real time. Some see it as a calculated move, a strategic reset designed to reduce exposure while maintaining flexibility. Others see it as something more concerning, a gap, a moment of vulnerability, an opportunity for escalation. And in geopolitics, perception can be just as powerful as reality, because decisions are not made based only on facts. They are made based on how those facts are understood. Right now, multiple actors are watching the same event, but drawing very different conclusions. And that is where risk begins to grow. Not just from action, but from miscalculation. A single misread signal, a single aggressive move, a single response that goes too far. That is all it takes to shift from tension to confrontation. And that is why this moment matters. Because it is not just about abandoned bases. It is about what comes next. Will this lead to de-escalation? A pause, a recalibration, a step back from the edge? Or will it trigger a chain reaction? Where each move invites another, pulling multiple sides deeper into conflict. That answer has not been decided yet, but the window for shaping it is already narrowing. Every hour brings new developments, new movements, new decisions being made behind closed doors. And with each passing moment, the stakes continue to rise. So now the focus turns to you, the viewer, because understanding these events as they unfold is more important than ever. Not just the headlines, but the meaning behind them. Not just what is happening, but why it is happening, and what it could lead to next. If you want clear, in-depth breakdowns of fast-moving global crises, if you want to stay ahead of the narrative, not behind it, make sure you subscribe, because this story is not over. It is only beginning, and the next update could change everything.